It's kind of the same like form and function. There is some of it as well, right? Where sometimes you say like, what does matter? Is it less, but like super high quality, so it feels good, or more, but is like, where it becomes a bit clumsy, right? I actually think that OmniFocus is exceptionally ergonomic. I think it's actually exceptionally ergonomic if you look at the outline manipulation part, right? Because that's, to me, what it is. It's a very sophisticated outline manipulator with nice UI around it, right? Being like, I used a lot of, like, I like thinking in trees and doing outlines and a lot of other things, right? And the ease with which I can do it here, right, manipulate this outline, assign attributes, etc., is very high.
You're listening to The Omni Show, where we connect with the amazing community surrounding the Omni Group's award-winning products. My name's Andrew J. Mason, and today we learn how Viktor Savkin uses OmniFocus. Well, welcome everybody to this episode of The Omni Show. My name's Andrew J. Mason, and today we're honored to be able to hang out with Viktor Savkin. He's the CTO at NX. He's an ex-Googler and the creator of NX and NX Cloud. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But Viktor, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to be able to chat with you today about how you use OmniFocus.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. Yeah, excited as well.
Absolutely. And Viktor, talk to us a little bit about where you find yourself geographically, and then a little bit more, color and flesh around who you are and what you find yourself doing career-wise.
So I'm in Toronto, so I'm in Canada, but I used to live in the States as well, so basically North America in general where I reside. And career-wise, I'm a programmer. I think of myself still as a programmer, even though I do less programming day to day, right? And I used to be at Google working on Angular, and then we started our own company. So now I'm kind of co-running this company with my co-founder, Jeff Cross.
That's fantastic. And talk to us more about NX and NX Cloud. For those, this is probably one of those difficult questions to answer. We're at a place where there are people who maybe don't have the level of technical knowledge or expertise, and they say, hey, so what do you do? How do you kind of condense that down for somebody where they understand, okay, at least I get the general idea of what Viktor's involved in?
Basically, I'm interested in tooling in general. I mean, maybe that's part of my obsession with like semi-productivity tooling as well, right? I like idea of like tooling of getting more leverage out of what you do, like in day to day, right? NX is a dev tool, so while I was at Google, we're working on some build tools there, and NX is a build tool for programmers to build software, right? Usually software at scale. It's used a lot by like sort of larger teams, larger enterprise, but not only, by small teams as well. So that's kind of my main area of interest is building tools for programmers who essentially build tools for someone else. It's like a very meta, like a second derivative kind of thing, right? So I do like it a lot because then I can use it myself. I dogfood it. I strongly believe in dogfood, and I imagine you folks dogfood stuff as well, right? Like you use your own software, so it feels nice to use what you build because you build for yourself as well, not just for other people, right? Yeah, at least there is at least one customer who is happy with it, or at least someone happy with it is you, right?
For us, I absolutely agree with and understand the idea of dogfooding, where it's like, let's make sure that this is at least solving the problem that we have for ourselves, and then taking it that step further and seeing if other people are interested in that as well.
100%. A lot of the quality, like the notion of quality in general, I find it's very tricky to define because sometimes you just cannot define it. It's not just numerical, like it is faster, like things like that you can define, right? But a lot of quality is not fully describable. It's something that is like when you have tactile experiences, for example, that's kind of, you see a thing that has a good there's a Planet VP. So I think it was released in 1963, long time ago, right? And the click is very satisfying, right? You cannot describe the click. It's just there. Unless you use it yourself, you won't be able to tell a very good click from a not a very good click, right? It's like you have to like feel it, right, day to day to be like very satisfying click. It actually makes a big difference. A good click compared to a bad click makes a big difference, and it's worth whatever 10x the price is compared to like a regular ClickPen, right? And the same stuff for software. If you use it and you dogfood it, use it yourself, you can actually see that quality. Almost like there is a book, if you read it, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which was written in the 60s, right? It's a very good book. I really liked it. He talks about quality a lot in there, right? So what is quality? And I really dig it. I think that his description of quality there is like the whole book is basically should be a book on building software, right? You read this book, like I kind of get it, right? And there is this almost imperceptible feeling of quality that you can only improve once you use stuff yourself. Strongly believe in dogfood as a result.
How somebody arrives at something they consider to be that intangible quality, is it more art, is it more science? Where do you kind of end up in the space where you arrive at that intangible space. You're like, okay, this does work, but how does somebody get there to say, you know what, I think we've landed on something that people will enjoy and find quality in, collectively?
I think it's like when you look back, it looks like it's like, you can rationalize anything you want if you look back. I think that's what happens. People are like, oh, it succeeded because those things were quality, because you could do this and that worked or whatever, right? But I'm not sure if the person who is in a moment like designing it, the designer, the engineer, or whoever, right? They are like, you know what, it needs to have a certain click, and when you I like this chair as well. The chair is also good quality, right? And like when you pull back, like it has to have a certain feel in your back that would, etc., etc. I'm not sure if that is fully conscious, or even if it is, if it's like numerically expressible, or it's just like, it just feels good, it's satisfying, the sound feels good, something about it works, right? So I found, at least in my day-to-day, a lot of the design, like some things are very easy. We are build tools, therefore, like things like performance matters. Okay, you look at numbers, smaller, better, faster, very easy, right? I imagine for you folks, that would be like latency. Okay, latency matters, less latency is always better, more latency is never better. So like, okay, those things are kind of, okay, that is figured out, right? But there is sort of second category, like where the bigger impact is. If you use something like, okay, something is off, it just doesn't feel right. You kind of walk around for months, sometimes for years, and then after years, like, if we just do it this way, then like, oh, now it feels elegant. Few ideas, it's elegant, it just feels smaller, it's easier to describe. And then you're like, oh, we should have always done it. It's because of this, because that property is true, and because of like. But I think that maybe those thoughts are somewhere in there, and you think about them here and there, and it kind of something gets triggered. But I think a lot of great stuff, good engineering and design and software is like a lot of it is art, but not art in a sense that visual art, but it's more like just something intuitive within you tells you that you need to explore this because you used it enough. It feels off, and then you're like, okay, it's better.
It's such a great point, though, because some of its hindsight is 2020. You don't realize it until after the fact, and then it's like, oh, of course, why weren't we always doing it this way? But that doesn't come unless you develop this kind of long-standing relationship where maybe it isn't a quantifiable set of steps that gets you there, but like as you get to know either the product or whatever it is that you're working on more and more, that puts you kind of in the realm, in the bullseye space to be able to land on that insight.
Well, 100%. And the part that makes it even worse is that there is kind of this is water talk by DFW, right? And like, that while you're within an environment, you don't see it, So you are using something, like, oh, it feels good. And then you see it very sharply when you use something else similar but not the same, right? So you're saying, okay, I'm not going to drive this car. I'm going to drive a different car. It's still a car. You just drive a different car. You immediately see, oh, well, those things about it cover much better. Because you always notice something that irritates you. You're like, oh my God, this thing here is just not as good. And you always notice this one thing, like that thing over there doesn't have this problem. Let me try the thing over there because clearly it doesn't have this problem. And then you go, try the thing over there. And like the first hour, you're very happy. Like, okay, that problem that I really hated over there, it's not present here. I'm very happy, very satisfied, right? Look, it's perfect. And then the day after, like, okay, nothing else here works out because all those things that I didn't pay attention to because they were just so easy, right? Go in that other product, right? And now when I switched the product, I could clearly see what was done right over there, right? So that ability to not notice, and that's kind of part of the good design. The good design of a lot of those tools that are meant to be like affordances for something else, right? They enable you to do something else, but they are not like the things in themselves, right? It's meant to be kind of just there and kind of work. Ideally without introducing friction, because there is no friction, you don't notice it. You only notice if you switch to something else and like, then you kind of feel it right away.
Do you have any recollection as to when you first came across the Omni Group or OmniFocus more specifically? Was there a day, a time where it's like, oh, I didn't know about this, I do now? Or was there just kind of like this growing awareness over time? Like, oh yeah, that's a product and it does some task management stuff, but over time just decided to use it?
I think that I for real started using it, like I probably tried, like I'm sure I looked at OmniFocus 1 at some point, but my full-time usage when I like really got deep was when OmniFocus 2 was released around that time, right? So, and then I really got in there because some of the folks I followed who I did respect in the engineering space used it, and the whole point that those folks had the same obsession with ergonomics, right? Things have to be just kind of done really well, where you feel like, there's a lot of thought put into the just interactions. Basic interactions done right, to me, are worth a lot. right? Because you do those basic interactions like 1,000 times a day, right? If you have an unusual interaction, it takes a long time. I actually don't care. It's an unusual interaction. The basic interaction has to be right? And I thought, okay, if those people are obsessed about it, let me try, right? And I don't remember the exact year, but it was right after OmniFocus 2 was released. I don't know, maybe a few months after, around that time. So quite some time.
That's fantastic. And I mean, for using software for such a long time, I mean, OmniFocus 2, I think, came out early 2010s, so it's got to at least be roughly 10 years. I know you had some thoughts surrounding, this process of using software for a long time. Do you mind kind of breaking that down or diving a little bit deeper into, what that means for you?
Yeah, I really like the idea. I also I like new things as well. When I see something new, like, oh, look at this, it's exciting or whatever, right? And because we're all human, I'm excitable. I like software in general, right? So it's not like I only use software for 10 years and nothing else, right? But there is something about using something for a long time, right? When you use something for a long time, and it's no longer exciting, but it provides a lot of value. And when I say long, exciting, in a good way, it's just there. It does what it's supposed to do. It's not breaking. It's not surprise me in a negative way. It works smoothly. It's part of my day to day, right? In a way that is just is, right? Like a good coffee machine would be. A good coffee machine, you use it, it works, and it gives you coffee. You're very happy with it. It doesn't have to excite you with new colors and new music. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, right? So I strongly believe in this kind of, once you commit to something and you use it for, I don't know, it doesn't have to be 10 years, but some number of years, and it becomes part of your muscle. You don't have to think about it. It's just there, right? It's one of the first things you install when you have a new computer or whatever, if you don't migrate in some way. To me, that it just gives you a lot more leverage in a way that when you I also write by hand. If you write by hand, you're able to write by hand. You have to really learn it. It's just nice to have this capability that you can just use freely, right? And so OmniFocus is one of those things where, because I use it for so long, and I use it in different ways. I structured my things in different ways. I export tags in lots of different ways. When OmniFocus 3 was released, and I do some things here and there, and I did more things. I did fewer things, and I tried a lot of scenarios. But generally speaking, the basic core capability was there, right? And at some point, it's just it's a nice thing that it doesn't cost you anything mentally, but it just gives you stuff, right? Because it becomes such a part of your day to day. And I have maybe 5 apps that I use like that for such a long time that you kind of get used to, and they're just part of your experience. Maybe even less than 5. I'm thinking, because obviously everyone uses Chrome and things like that, but those things you can swap around and they actually don't have the same effect, because I think that the competition is much closer to each other, right? But in terms of more unique apps, right, it will be OmniFocus, would be IntelliJ, maybe Alfred. There are a few apps that I use, right, for a bazillion years, and the effect is very good. And yeah, so I really believe if you find something, just commit to it, explore new things, try things out. I tried many things during those 10 years, right? I tried lots of different apps that kind of do a similar thing, and just to see what they do well, etc. But yeah, I always kind of very quickly come back. I tried it, let me see, let me try it for a week.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about what your system looks like currently. You kind of mentioned it morphs and evolves over time. So, any given day it might be something different. But is there anything about your system where you would say, I think that's uniquely mine? There's, I've seen different ways that people kind of set things up and structure workflows and things, but this is how it works for me.
Yeah, so I went through lots of different setups, and it partially is depending on what type of work I did. When my primary work was kind of individual contributor type of work, where it was a lot of creative work, mostly by myself with some few interactions. I used it in one way. This day, a lot of my work is connecting people, connecting ideas, and making sure things are unblocked, right? And so my usage changed, right? And I also kind of went from going super hardcore and only tracking things on OmniFocus to now I do that, and I also write on a piece of paper, right? As it for my what my current in progress stuff, right? And so what I do currently is actually super much simpler than what I used to do, but it still works well. So I use projects hierarchy projects, depending on with different kind of a very sophisticated folder structure, because I do like the idea of grouping things visually. It helps me. I try to do tags only, but okay, that's more. So I like the idea of having a tree, right? And I do use tags for if I want to annotate things for team members that I want to interact with, or ideas, or teams, or basically something that helps me look stuff up very quickly, and to track progress. So I use tags to track progress when I would say what stage is in the context in which I want to communicate it, like a meeting or whatever, right? I use several perspectives. my perspectives are kind of less, maybe I don't know how unusual they are, but I have basically like the big three, and I just annotate projects in a certain way visually with like basically have a special name thing, and then I would only show projects that have that name pattern, right? So that would be my like, okay, just focus on the three, and it's kind of the most important bits. And then I have like everything that is reasonably active, and then the last part is just like the rest of it plus random notes, because I use OmniFocus not just for actionable things, but just for notes as well. I actually think it's just a good outline lookup thing. And when I need to like have a hierarchy on notes, basically a replacement for sticky notes. If I would have like, I know, a few hundred sticky notes, right? I would write a thought, I put something in there, and okay, that's context in which I want to look it up. Because OmniFocus is the only thing I trust. I had like this whole, at some point, the diagram of like different ways of storing knowledge, right? And I think I kind of separate knowledge in two ways. One, that is, I need to make sure that if I write something down, it will come back to me at some point, like that.
Yes.
The recall will be forced, right? Yeah. Versus if I write something down in here, I have to think about the recall, right? So like if I want to say, I want this receipt, I don't want the receipt to be, once we hey, think about this receipt, right? No, in that case, it will go into like, I need to initiate the lookup kind of thing, right? With OmniFocus, it's kind of both. I do initiate lookups, obviously, but I will say it's a place where I know if I write something down at some point, even if I get to initiate a lookup, it will come back to me. So like anything that I think I for sure need to remember, which is all the things, right, would go in there first, right? So it ended up being like a weird mishmash of actionable things, delegation things, status updates that I also write down there because it's much easier for me to track, right? And random sticky notes, because the moment I kind of thought about it is not a task or a to-do list kind of thing, but just a big outliner with sophisticated status management. I could just put all of my stuff on that, and it works really well because the ergonomics is all perfectly executed. I do like it for that.
What suggestions might you have for somebody who is maybe just getting started in task management? It doesn't have to be like an OmniFocus specific thing, but is there anything that you've seen as you've grown over the years that, you know what, this has been kind of the biggest bang for the buck, biggest low hanging fruit that I've been able to use and implement, that it's really, really helped me out as I've implemented more levels of responsibility in my life?
I mean, that's kind of point one, right? Make sure that you have to remember things. This is almost like the GTD kind of part, right? Which at some point I was like really believed in it, then I kind of, whatever, through my, but I think some parts I still strongly believe it in that, like, don't keep it in your head, right? Head is for thinking thoughts, not for, remembering thoughts kind of stuff, right? Write it down somewhere. That's kind of one. And the second part, which I think is where I really think some of the, like knowledge management tools kind of fall short, is that it's only important to write it down somewhere if that thing is going to be used, right? If you just keep writing things down and then you never, like, it's just this giant, but people also, I collect so much information, but do you look it up? No. Then like, might as well not collect it, right? So like I think we are living at a time where the most important skill is not information or gathering information, is like filtering it to like something that is a smaller set, that is more essential, right? I think OmniFocus in this case actually helps because there are mechanisms for resurfacing things that are quite easy to use, and they enable you to do that. But basically the idea here is that if you collect something, it's better to collect a little bit less, but in a way where it is actually useful, right? So in my case, if it's useful, it goes to OmniFocus for sure. If it's like maybe probably not going to be useful, I still collect it. It's just it's not like kind of polluting the more filtered set, right? Where like I really need to remember these few hundred things. There are other 10,000 things I might need, but probably not. Okay, that lives elsewhere, right? If I mix them in the same place, okay, just bad things happen because you're either overwhelmed by just the amount of noise you see, right? Or, like just bad things happen.
And some of it's philosophical too, because you're forced to say, okay, am I really just capturing this because it's a thought that I don't want to lose, and I really may have something to do with that later on, or it might be useful, like you say, to me, or am I just capturing this for posterity just because I don't want a part of me to go away? I don't know. I don't know what the reason is.
I know what you mean. I mean, yes, it depends on what your objective is. If you're thinking you've been productive, that's different. If you're thinking, I just think it's important for me to have it, that's different. It's, depends on what you want to get to.
You talked to me about a very a status kind of driven workflow here, where tracking things that are in progress. You've got tags that are manufactured lists for remembering based on certain criteria. Do you use any automation in OmniFocus as well?
Yeah. So I do use repeated tasks, lots of them, right? to the degree where at some point I went overboard with like a lot of things, like, you know what, because at some point, like, you kind of always go, and that's, to me, it's like a weird thing that everyone has to go through. Like, you either rely on push or pull. Like, pull idea is the best part. You go inside, like, you know what, I cannot forget to undress myself before I go to bed, because, like, it's self-evident. You like, the process forces you to, right? But it's some things aren't like that. Like, okay, like some even mundane things. My bin, I need to put out the bins for garbage collection. Okay, I don't see them, so I can easily forget them. So, like, figuring out how to do this push and pull well, right? What is better to be pulled, whereas like the just circumstance forces you to and pulls the work out of you, comparing to like, okay, you need to be reminded, right? So, but I do use some of the things like that. I used to be in the more sophisticated stuff, like, okay, I put it over here, it's transformed the task, and then put it over there. And at some point, it's kind of, it went to the issue I talked before. There's a lot capture that was kind of signal to noise ratio just went down for me.
Yes.
It works for some other people, so if it works for other folks, it's fantastic.
Talk to me more about that dance between ergonomics and features and the friction that's introduced, and just a little bit of how that finds itself showing up in your world as you're working.
I said, to me, the ergonomics and the features are in conflict, essentially. Right? Not always, but a lot of the times they're in conflict, because and the most ergonomic thing I could think of in terms of the basic example, like if you take a piece of paper or like a notepad and you write with a pen, it's very ergonomic. It's always on, it works, right? It's very easy to use. It's very hard to use it incorrectly, right? It does very little, but for what it does, it's perfect, right? It provides an experience, right? The tactile experience is very nice. The paper is soft, right? It's nice to touch, right? If you look at an iPad does what most does, all more features, right? But the writing is like a 5-year-old, because it, texture is different. So like it's just different. A lot more features. And I would argue, in terms of like the actual act of writing, it's a lot less ergonomic. It just does a lot more. So now you have a trade-off, right? Do you want all those features, you like just being able to store stuff or resize or remove, right? Or do you want to have none of it, but the most beautiful tactile experience, right? And it's kind of the same like form and function. There is some of it as well, right? Where sometimes you say like, what does matter? Is it less, but like super high quality, so it feels good, or more, but is like, where it becomes a bit clumsy, right? And I actually think that OmniFocus is exceptionally ergonomic, right? I know some people say, well, it's more complex than both, but I think that I think it's actually exceptionally ergonomic if you look at the outline manipulation part, right? Because that's, to me, what it is. It's a very sophisticated outline manipulator with nice UI around it, right? And being like, I used a lot of, like, I like thinking in trees and doing outlines and a lot of other things, right? And the ease with which I can do it here, right, manipulate this outline, assign attributes, etc., is very high. All right, it's very high, where I think when OmniFocus 4 was still in beta, which I used, it wasn't working perfectly sometimes, and you're like, it just, like, it actually was a big deal, because ergonomic, like, the features was there, and it was actually fine. It was kind of usable, but there was some imperfection with where focus would go, etc., right? Which just like, that just bothers me so much, right? In a way, like a pen that is faulty would bother you if you write. If somehow you write, like, sometimes, and you have to restart, it just like breaks your flow, right? So for me, the ergonomics part is the part that doesn't break if you use it effortlessly. You don't think about it. It doesn't require anything. It just works, right? And I really highly value it, because then if you find anything like that, it doesn't have to be software in general. Very few things are executed so well, where it's just, there's nothing you need to, you're like, okay, this is fantastic. This works really well, right?
It's so interesting. You mentioned that too, about that, because of I think of the metaphor with the cars that you were talking about, where you sit down in the car and it might not even be a bad thing, but just the gear shift is over here now and it used to be over here. Like, just that mental fatigue that you have of like, like, just like you mentioned, it breaks your flow. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And the issue that when you add too many features, they have to be connected in a coherent way, right? Unless it's like you can have an app with lots of features, but every feature is completely distinct. Okay, there is this thing. Let's imagine OmniFocus would just integrate with like OmniGraph, and would be like, you press a button, OmniGraph will start. Okay, then there is no cost ergonomically, because those sets of features are distinct, right? But presumably, we're talking about features that are kind of interconnected. The more features you add in the kind of interconnected space, the more there is opportunity for friction, right? And I think I'm more gravitating towards you can do just a little bit less, which I actually think OmniFocus does a little bit less. No, like, I know people do compare with like the most simplest of to-dos to whatever, but like, generally speaking, I actually think it does fairly little. I mean it in a good way. As it has a particular feature set it wants to support. It supports that feature set really well, and it doesn't try to add 5 other things to the feature set. I mean, it does add a little bit here and there, but I think the balance is still correct. Where I could like the capabilities are pretty powerful. I can do a lot of stuff, but they're ergonomically like 100 out of 100, right? And that matters more, right? I would say like if you don't add any new features, I'll be pretty happy. Like I don't need more features because I think it's fine, right? Like the core value there. Like if you look at whatever the pens, like the ballpoint pen was invented some late 19th century, I think, like some time ago, right? And it's basically the same. And it's, thank God, we don't need a new, like it's fine. You can refine a few things here and there, but it's a perfect design, right? Yeah, and it's worth appreciating when you arrive at something that kind of works really well and really doesn't require that much to provide value. It already provides a lot of value.
I love that, because how much can you improve the pen, moving forward in the years without it feeling like it's a gimmick of some sort. So I
that's right, exactly. Yeah.
Talk to me about, is there anything that you consider in your journey that would be considered, or you would consider to be like, that was kind of a mistake, or that was a bit of a misstep. I thought that doing this to my system or changing it in that way would be an improvement for me. But as I did it, and you mentioned before about maybe overcomplicating things or running too many automations or, too granular with tasks where, the context is going to remind me anyway. So it's not really that big of a deal. But anything else that shows up for you where you're like, I really thought that was going to work out for me. And if you can maybe save some other people some grief by mentioning it, they're saying, maybe I'll just skip that part. Maybe I will do that myself.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I imagine everything that didn't work for me would work for someone else because the whole point is that there's, right? So I'm not saying that when I, say, okay, that didn't work for me, that is bad. It might be great for someone else and think. So I tried to do several things that did work as well. At some point, I was into time blocking a lot, I'm still kind of, but less so. And I'm like, okay, let me encode time blocking in OmniFocus. I know people do it. Do it, and it's fine, right? It really didn't work. The idea of, like I said, this is a morning task, this is an evening task. Like, I actually don't need that. And I think to me, that ended up being too much push, so to speak, right? Where the work was just thrown at me instead of just saying, you know what, I'm not just able to do it in the morning or something came up. I'm just too tired or whatever. So I don't want to be retagging everything from morning to evening and every time. So like, to me, that didn't work, right? The other part that time blocking wise didn't work, which I know work with someone else and it's good for them, is like assigning kind of the energy level like time. So there will be a 2-hour task. Because then I started with my particular engineer in mind, like I have 7 tasks, like, oh, that will be more like 20 minutes because it has to like honestly, and then I will be like, okay, I completed this task, but it was part of this task when they were there. It just bugs me beyond belief, right? Yeah. Whereas right now, like, okay, I have those things. I'm actually thinking less about task unless it's like a collection of miscellaneous tasks. But if it's a project, like, it kind of doesn't matter when I complete what. Like, I'm working on this project thing. So I will look at those, and then at the end of the day, like sometimes in the middle of the day, but all the time I just complete whatever I done, and I could restructure the whole project on the spot and say I have those 7 things with some particular hierarchy. I'm going to rewrite the whole hierarchy at the end of the day because my understanding of the problem has changed. Right?
That's right.
And that's fine. And the moment I assign time, so any other things, it becomes a lot trickier because now I have to kind of carry over, certain things for it to make sense mathematically. And just bugged me beyond this. So I kind of went into this, right? And in general, I think I went with a lot more. It's okay to just rewrite things. Sometimes I would look at my project and that looks fine, like 5 or 6 projects, but sometimes it's very hard to know how they relate because is they interconnected? The work I do is where all these projects are part of like a bigger whole. And I'm like, you know what? Those are 5. Those are like 7 other projects structured differently. I'll be like, rewrite everything. Some of them being one big thing. I became a lot less obsessed about like continuity of a project comparing to like what I would do on a piece of paper. On a piece of paper, I would just say, scratch it and just rewrite in a different way, right? So I kind of do the same. And that's where the ergonomics matters because it's so easy to do. I don't have to like say, now I have to like, click a bunch of things and remove like it. I can do it in like a minute, right? In a way that's very easy, right? So anyway, so that's sort of structuring about time, like time blocking thing didn't work for me super well. In terms of other stuff that OmniFocus specifically, a lot of things didn't work for me in other areas, right? A lot of automation, again, didn't work for me because I find that the act of processing stuff, like say an email to a task, actually thinking specifically what I want to do and doing it in a very like conscious way. And actually maybe it helps because a lot of the time the tasks are not one-to-one. Right, so the one email could create a bunch of tasks, one email could affect a bunch of tasks, etc., right? Multiple emails could affect the same task. And the moment that this one-to-one thing is enforced in some way, I find it creates like a very rigid structure where you look at it, okay, I have 17 things, and in your head, it's actually 5 things that's different, right? You always have to like draw a piece of paper, like that's actually what's going on. Like the more automation you have, I think because automation is a bit more rigid, I think the more in my case, it creates a structure that doesn't actually reflect how I think about the problem. So I always have to like map what's written down to what I actually think, which kind of sucks, right? If I do it by hand, the mismatch of my mental model and what's in the app is less, right? So when I look at it, like, okay, it actually matches my mental model, right? And it helps me.
And it's too fluid. Your workflow sometimes is much too fluid to be able to say this is the way it's supposed to be, so much so forever that you have to sit there and spend time rethinking about it all the time. So
that's it.
Victor, I love this conversation. You have a brilliant mind, and hopefully folks will find it super, super stimulating. How can folks connect with you and what you're up to and find out more about NX?
So if you're a programmer and you like build tools, okay, go to nx.dev, right? And you can find out about NX. You can reach me on Twitter. You can reach me on Blue Sky. That's about it.
Victor, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time hanging out with us. I know you're a busy person, and it's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Hey, and thank all of you for listening today, too. You can find us on Mastodon at The Omni Show at omnigroup.com. You can also find out everything that's happening with the Omni Group at omnigroup.com/blog.